Hi, my name is Kiki, and this is my presentation on the practicum film Baptism. To begin a short analysis, Jeffrey, a teenager in a small town, finds himself isolated from his high school peers and his own father, and as a result, he takes long walks into the forest after school where he finds a dead woman's body and meets a man who may be her killer. So for this film, our theme is man versus self in nature. Our genre is drama, and our target audience is 18 to 25-year-old males who are in school and can relate to Jeffrey in that they kind of feel isolated or like an outcast. We have 4 locations in this script, and the most prominent one is the small town. I see this small town kind of being in the northern Midwest, and I really want to emphasize line, color, pattern, and texture in our design. The lines are really important to me because I want them to draw focus on the action. With the colors, it's really important that this is kind of set in the fall time, so we get kind of like a vibrancy to contrast this bleak town. And then different patterns I really like to emphasize the cookie cutter structure that small towns typically have. And then different textures and materials such as like the brick, cement, siding, and the fabric pavement. Our second location is Jeffrey's house. We don't see much of this location. We really kind of just get a glimpse of the living room and then a little bit into the kitchen, but I think that this location is important because it showcases a lot of like our main characters, where he comes from, what his home life is like, and I really want to show off the color, pattern, texture, and line in our design. With the color, I want to show warm but bleak colors. With patterns, I want to see several patterns on the set, including rugs, furniture patterns, curtain patterns, kind of cheap floors. In this script, the house is owned by Jeffrey's dad, it's clear that he does not have a knack for interior design. But I see the siding on the house having a lot of texture, and even the yard work itself, you can just see it's not super kept up. And yeah, so next we have our public high school, and this is kind of where Jeffrey feels unsafe, where he feels claustrophobic, so it's really important that I emphasize line, texture, color, and scale in my elements of design. Line for the same reason, to kind of stay symmetrical, so we can kind of point to Jeffrey in the main focus, since he is going to be in a sea of students a lot of the time. Different texture, because there's going to be a lot of overwhelming visuals in this scene, such as like all the students and their clothing, the bricks, the ceiling lights. There's a lot of different colors, and the scale is going to be really important because we need Jeffrey to stand out in this large sea of students when Jeffrey is someone who typically kind of just blends in. Our last location is the forest, and this is kind of represents Jeffrey's safe haven, like where he feels the most calm. So I really want to focus on the texture here of the forest, from the dirt and the plants, and kind of the richness that we get from the pine trees, and the vibrancy of the colors, the value of these colors and how they contrast, and how the lighting that we see kind of shadows and makes a path for the audience. In the scale, lastly, our main character Jeffrey is surrounded by tall trees, though he is completely isolated. I have a few artists that really inspired this production design that I have laid out, and one of them is Ivan Shishkin. I really enjoy his work because I feel like a lot of his paintings and drawings of the forest really bring a sense of like warmth and calmness. This is important, obviously, because this is where he does feel safe, and I feel like finding an atmosphere or like some spots that look similar to these, if possible, I think would be really perfect, because they just capture a vibe that's really appropriate for this film. A second artist I thought of was Edward Hopper, who's really famous, and I love his paintings so much because I feel like in his paintings, he does caption isolation really well, and I feel like that is such a big theme in this film for our main character, who just kind of feels like he is just stuck in a world that he doesn't really belong to, and he's kind of in his own head looking outwards. And I feel like this kind of the feelings and the emotions that you get looking at one of his paintings is kind of like what I want the audience to feel with this script. Here's a breakdown. So in this film, I broke it down scene by scene, and we don't have too much set dressing since this is mostly filmed kind of like outside or just like in a big open space in general. But our main elements are hair and makeup, since we're going to need a lot of makeup for the background, the main characters, then also special effects makeup for the dead body, and also there's a broken nose scene, and then our costumes as well, because there's a lot of characters in this film. And then that takes us to our budget, which this is also a preliminary assumption. We have for our props, makeup, set deck, and wardrobe. Our props are mostly just going to be for the background, because they have their school lunch, their backpacks. Jeffrey's bike is really important in this script, and then the man in the woods has a rope, handsaw. And then the makeup, we need to get a few kits, something that's like special effects, corpse makeup, and then just like a general makeup kit. And then our set deck, I see us needing some things for the father's house. He kind of lives in a low-income ranch, so I see a lot of like thrifted decor that we could borrow. And then high school cafeteria food, trays, etc. That's all just probably going to have to be rented from prop houses. And then wardrobe, there's some outfits for Jeffrey and his father. And then the corpse will have a ripped dress. And then the man in the woods is just going to be kind of like overalls, plaid type outfit. Here are kind of like the color palettes that I have for the location, for overall, and for character. A lot of these look similar because I really wanted to come out with the rich greens of the forest and kind of like the orange-brown shades for the home and the school. For the overall, I see there being a bleak overtone, but this is really contrasted by the rich greens and the browns that kind of dry up the small town atmosphere. Basically, the forest should represent, a safe haven for Jeffrey, and the school should kind of represent somewhere that's negative and unsafe for him. And the last strip represents Jeffrey, who is someone who has kind of like wears kind of these warmer tones, darker shades of clothing that is called for in the script, but I think it also kind of matches his isolated demeanor as well. This is kind of my inspiration for this character, Jeffrey. I was really inspired by this actor in general, but these are the kind of wardrobe that the script calls for. Nothing too exciting. I mean, he's pretty much a plain Jane type of dude that unfortunately does end up getting bullied. His father is kind of like a tough guy. He's a single dad. He's a very simple life. He hunts, has this truck, his beer, and that's kind of, what he cares about most, and that he's just a very simple man. His high school peers, I get a lot of inspiration from just like typical movies and TV shows with bullies and these types of dudes. In this script, it kind of calls for them to be a little bit more trendy, and they kind of make fun of the way that Jeffrey is just because he's very simple and very soft-spoken, and they are kind of the opposite energy of that. And then the woman in the forest and her husband, that's going to use a lot of in-depth research because the corpse makeup, we want her to look purple. The script calls that she has like really pale purpley skin, and her husband, I want him to look kind of threatening, kind of sketchy, but he ends up having the soft side that's kind of like Jeffrey, where he's also kind of misunderstood in a way that we don't really get to find out yet. And because he does end up offering Jeffrey a piece of advice that kind of, changes his mindset in this film. And then to move on to our concept art, this is one piece that I sketched up. It's kind of what I thought about when Jeffrey sees the woman in the woods for the first time and her laying there and, trying to figure out, what this body is and who she is. And this is the second piece I thought of for the small town. It's kind of a really bigger scope scale, just because I see this realistically being more in the northern Midwest, but I just pictured a small little cute corner where everyone is just kind of knows each other and in a small space. Here's the ground plan that I originally sketched up for Jeffrey's living room. You can see the dimensions are pretty large for what actually ended up happening in this SketchUp model, where I kind of took out the living room and made it a little bit more condensed. I don't see us doing a build for the real film, but if we were to, this would be the most realistic set to build. We don't really see much of anything else besides this entryway where we see the main door, and so this would be something besides just like, you know, little details of props and whatnot, what would be realistically in Jeffrey's father's home. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching.